All right, our lesson this morning is entitled Demonstrate Allegiance, and it's taken from Daniel chapter 3, verses 14 through 16. So let's take a look at the printed text and come back and we'll talk about it. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made, well, but if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning, fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake, and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats, and their outer garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's command was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake, and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth, and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire. All right. Nebuchadnezzar had taken captive a lot of young people out of Jerusalem. He had brought them in, and he had taught them, fed them, took care of them for 3 years. And of all of the ones that were in this training program, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had been the top ones. And they had become very instrumental in service to the king even before the end of the 3-year period. It says in the 2nd year that he had a dream that really troubled him. And he went to his wise men and wanted them to interpret the dream. And they said, well, tell us the dream first. He said, nope, you tell me the dream and then you interpret it. If you don't, you're dead. Of course, they couldn't do it. He killed all the wise men. Daniel heard about it, and he requested a meeting with the king. He and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego prayed and asked God to give them the dream and then to give them an interpretation. And God did. He gave it to Daniel. So Daniel came in and told the king. And it very much pleased the king. This was in the 2nd year of his reign. And it pleased him, and he gave him gifts and promoted them all. So they were already in service to the king. And as time progressed, and the king decided to make this big giant golden statue out in the plain of Dura. And he said, whenever you hear the music, everybody must fall down and worship this image. Now, I got to thinking about that. when they played music, that was a designation to fall down and worship it. Has anybody ever been in a country where the Muslim religion was practiced? What happens several times throughout the day?
You hear the music.
It's basically, well, where I was in Israel and heard it, it was a man kind of a sing, but it was kind of a hauntingly pretty noise, I thought. But it was basically music, and that was the call to prayer. And it made me think about this, you know. They played the music, which designated you must fall down and worship this. Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel were rising to preeminence in the king's realm there. They were outsiders. You know, they were Hebrew children, and the regular Babylonian elites were jealous, and they didn't like what they were seeing. So when you become jealous of somebody, typically you try to find a way to silence them or get rid of them or cause them a lot of grief. So they're looking. Now, I'm not sure exactly where Daniel was in this instance, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego got ratted out, that they were not bowing down towards the image when they heard the music. So they came and told the king and said, hey, your little Hebrew boys aren't doing what you commanded them to do. They're just snubbing their nose at you. Well, the king didn't like what he heard, but he was in a dilemma. He's the king. His word is absolute authority. And here he commanded everybody to fall down and worship, and you got word that 3 people aren't. So he summons them, and that's where our lesson picks up. It says in verse 14, Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now it's interesting that he gave him a chance to discuss the situation. He could have just come in and said, kill him. But yet these guys were very important people to him in their abilities, what they could do, and their wisdom and their knowledge. They rose up and they were smarter than anybody else. So now they've been accused of doing something, and this is not just being done private. There's a lot of people that are involved that are seeing this, and the king is between a rock and a hard place. So, is it true, guys, that you're not falling down to worship my image? He said, now before you answer, if you be ready, that at the time when you hear the sound of the harp, flute, the cornet, sacment, psaltery, and the dulcimer, and all kinds of music, that you do fall down and worship the image which I have made, well. In other words, I'm giving you a chance to prove your loyalty right now. I've got a time set up. They're going to start this music, and if you fall down and worship it, it will be well with you. So he's giving them a choice. But then there's the old word there, but. If you worship not, you shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning, fiery furnace. And by the way, who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Now, there's a lot of stuff here, but they're brought in before the king. He's got his counselors there, and there's groups of people there, and everybody knows what's going on. This is all spread throughout the kingdom, I'm sure, that they're not worshiping. And he really is torn what to do. So he said, listen, guys, I'm not sure if it's true or not. I'm going to give you an opportunity to prove your loyalty. I'm going to play the music. You fall down and worship, everything will be good. But if you don't, you're immediately going to be taken and thrown into this burning, fiery furnace. Now, what was that burning, fiery furnace? Was that something that was there for trash disposal? Or was it set up to take care of situations when somebody didn't obey? Doesn't really say, but I would say it was erected to prove or to scare subjects into obeying what the king said.
I thought the book said it was the fire bricks, or not just
fire bricks before.
Well, that's what I'm saying. What I was being facetious about burning trash. They didn't do that, but just it could be whatever. But it was a furnace there, but it's got different temperatures that it can be heated to. So he's given them an opportunity to prove themselves, their loyalty. And he's stuck. He has to do something because this is not going to go away. He's going to have to deal with this. So he's kind of saying, if you'll do it, everything will be good. If not, you're going to go in that furnace. So here's these 3 Hebrew children that have got a decision to make. Everybody else is doing it. I can do it and then say, God, I'm sorry, I just did it to save my life. You think what would be going on in their minds? They'd already said, we don't want to eat the king's food. And God honored that. That was a small thing. When you honor God in small things, He'll help you to honor Him in large things. They're in a large thing now. It's a life and death situation. And He said, the choice is yours. You either do what you're supposed to do, what I've commanded, and show allegiance to me by worshiping this fake God that I put out here, or you die. That is your choice. And that's basically what he's saying right here. Well, verse 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. Now, that's an interesting way of saying something here. A lot of times when you read the Bible, especially the King James Version, it's hard to really understand what's being said. But when you look at this and it says, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter, we ain't going to sugarcoat or blow smoke up you. We're not going to do all that. We're just going to tell you like it is. You know, we didn't come up with a prearranged, well, let's do this and kind of get out of it this way. No, they're not trying to evade the question. They know what they're going to say. We're going to serve our God. In other words, we've made a stand for God when we first came into this program. And I don't know whether the king knew about them not eating his food or not, but people did. And they knew they were making a stand for their God. They're making another stand for their God. Now, when you make a stand for God, as people have done throughout the centuries, sometimes God delivers. Sometimes God allows their life to be a sacrifice. They become a martyr. The question is, what are you going to do? Are you going to try to save your skin, or are you going to honor God? And you say, Mike, why are you even asking that question? Because that's going to be a question that's going to have to be answered in the future at some point. There's going to be an image set up, and there's going to be a mark, and you're going to have to choose whether to accept that mark or not. It's not going to be, you're going to have a choice. You can accept it or you can reject it. What happens if you reject it? You die. You die. You can't buy, you can't sell, you can't function, you just can't live. Now, I don't know when that's going to happen. A lot of people said, the vaccine's the mark of the beast. Well, I disagree with that. I don't think it is. But it could be a precursor, conditioning us, Pat.
But why do these boosters keep extending out and out and out?
Yeah.
It gives them the opportunity to develop something.
Uh-huh. Did you read about the monkeys up in Pennsylvania?
Mm-hmm. Oh, got out here.
Got loose.
Yeah, what was that all about? I don't know what's coming, but I think by the way this whole thing's been handled, it's raised a lot of doubt in people's minds that they don't trust things anymore. I try to read as much stuff as I can and try to stay educated. And, what are we up to now? The fourth shot, fourth booster, or whatever it is. And what's that going to do to our immunosystem?
Yeah, and Soros and Bill Gates have bought testing companies.
Yeah. Well, I just read a report in Epic Times about, the new home test that Biden's going to allow all the homes to have, 4 per family per month or whatever it is.
Made in
China. So folks, no wonder, so many people don't trust things going on. And a conspiracy, give it a month or so and it's real. Chris.
Well, you know, that what they did here was big. And it was, you know, obviously life or death. But we face situations like that every single day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where we, you know, are we going to take a stand for Christ, or are we going to compromise our values?
Yes. Exactly. Now, we don't know what's going to happen to him yet, do we? We haven't gotten to that verse. They don't know what's going to happen to him. Don.
Going back to where this conversation began, the subject getting over to the pandemic.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about what you would do if you were presented with a situation, and we've heard stories about it, where a person will throw himself on top of a hand grenade to save the lives of the people standing around?
Mm-hmm.
That's where that's the nut cutting, is when, you know, are you ready and were you prepared to sacrifice or to give up in the interest of other people? And I think that's a critical question. I think that's something everybody has to deal with.
Yeah. Well, my main thing is to make sure that I stay true to God and serve him and do what he wants me to do. So let's go back here to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're going to tell him like it is. And in verse 17, it says, "If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up." Our God is able to deliver us, and we're trusting that he will. But if he chooses not to deliver us, that's okay too. We're still not going to serve your image. Now, either they're going to be delivered from the fiery furnace, or they're going to be delivered from having to serve the king's image. One way or the other, they're going to get deliverance. Whether God saves them from the fire or God takes them on home to be with him. But they are not going to accept the king's program here. They've made that stand. They're going to live or die by it, because their relationship with God is that important to them. And folks, that's a lot of what we're missing today in the churches. We are not willing to make a stand that's going to cost us something. I'll talk it. I'll do it a little bit. But if it's going to cost me my job or my position or some money or this or that, we don't. Conrad.
It's pretty easy to substitute the golden image with things these days, like critical race theory.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't bow down to that, your
Yeah.
kids can't go to school.
Yeah.
Wokeism.
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
Yeah.
A lot of that going on these days.
I know. There's all kind of stuff going on, and it's all about control. You know, you go to New York, you can't go into a restaurant and eat unless you prove a vaccine card.
Bow down.
Yep. So, okay. But they're saying, no matter what the outcome is, King, we refuse to bow down to that image, because it goes against everything within us and our relationship with our God, who is a living God. It says we shall not bow down to any false image, therefore we're not going to do it. You do what you got to do, we're going to do what we're going to do. They don't know the outcome. And to them, it doesn't matter what the outcome is. They're not going to bow down. We need to take that same attitude and develop that into our character and our walk today, that we're going to stand for Christ no matter what the cost.
Trust him at all costs.
Did you ever read the book In His Steps? Man, that book changed me. That was written many, many years ago. And it was about a group of people in one particular church that made a vow that for every decision they had to make, they would ask the question, what would Jesus do? You remember the WWJD bracelet? That's where that came from. What would Jesus do? And then based on that is what decision they would make, no matter what the cost. And the book went through how it affected these people. Some bad, some good, it just went through it. But they made that decision for 1 year. They would ask that question on every decision they had to make, and then answer or do that based on what Jesus would do. And it was very interesting. It's good. Mike?
We get a magazine from Voice of Martyrs, and people all over are facing death. For instance, in Cambodia, in India, in Colombia, South America.
Yeah.
There's examples in there of pastors refuse to obey whether they take my life or not, I'm going to be faithful. And there's a lot of martyrs today, Christian martyrs all over.
Yes.
More than most people realize.
You're exactly right. Yeah, we just don't hear about it, a lot of it, but they are. So we got to make in our mind resolve, what are we going to do? Because there will be a time come eventually that we're going to be tested. We're going to have to decide, what are we going to do?
And China's a big one too, buddy.
Oh, China's probably one of the worst. Yeah.
They're closing down churches, bombing churches, and beating the people and killing some of them.
Well, they want to get rid of Christianity. That's just pure and simple. That's Satan.
That's end time.
That's exactly right, Don. That's end times.
But there's another fact too. God did not reach down the Rio Grande and with a finger and say, this is the border. You have to stay there. You have to stay here. Nor did he create a thing, Planned Parenthood, with 62 million dead in the short period of time that's been around.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot of caveats out there to deal with. We make decisions, or we allow the people that represent us to make decisions, and we ignore it, or end time's coming.
Yeah. When we started killing babies in 1973.
Right. 62 million.
Yeah,
One every 45 seconds.
We're going to be judged for that. And I'm praying that this Supreme Court deal eventually will overturn Roe v. Wade. And I think that's where we're headed. It'll go back to the states, but there's a lot of work ahead of us. So keep
How
praying.
much money is given to Planned Parenthood by the taxpayers a year these days? I can't find the answer.
A lot, but I don't know the answer either, but a lot.
They hide it.
Huh?
They hide it.
Oh, yeah, they hide it. Exactly. All right, verse 19. So they told Nebuchadnezzar, no, we're not going to do it. So Nebuchadnezzar said, well, okay. No, he didn't say that. Verse 19 says, then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He got so mad that I think his face contorted. He just was filled with rage because of what they said to him in front of everybody. They put him in a really bad position, and it just really upset him and made him mad. So his visage changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. So he says, go heat that thing up 7 times, or in other words, as high as it will go. 7 is the number of completion, so heat it up as high as it'll go. Now you think about this. He's mad at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So you heat that furnace up as high as it'll go, that's going to be a lot quicker, less painful death, right? But what he's trying to do is he's trying to show fear, instill fear in them to get them to change their mind, or in the people to say, here's what happens when you disobey the king. He's instilling fear. That's how they ruled, by intimidation and fear. And it says, then he commanded the most mighty, the strongest, the most powerful, the highly, elite military guys, mighty men in his army. He said, you bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. So he got his strongest, most reliable, able men that he trusted to bind them up. 3 of them, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, their hats, and their outer garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Typical dress of a Babylonian was the hat, the hosen, the cloak, the outer garment. Now, you could say, okay, why does it go through and talk about this? Well, to me, it's the expediency. Just bind them up right now, right here, just the way they are, the way they came before me. Bind them up. Conrad.
Interesting to me that the word hosen in German means pants.
Yeah. Which I saw that also when I was looking at some strong stuff, that it could be pants or what, but they were covered in clothing which is very flammable. Okay? So it's going to, but I think with that furnace 7 times or as hot as it'll go, it really doesn't matter. That's why I think it was the expediency thing. Although they're saying, well, it makes it more flammable and be more painful. I think it was expediency. It's just get them right now, bind them just the way they are, and get them out of my sight. He's trying to scare them.
What Nebuchadnezzar didn't realize their garments were made of asbestos.
Yes.
Carbon fiber.
Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You know, I used to tell a story that when I was young and growing up in Kentucky, we was real poor, you know, and we had a potbelly stove in the middle of the house, and throw firewood in there to keep the house warm. And ran out of firewood, got so cold, and didn't have any firewood left. So my dad went out there with a big old shovel, opened up that door of that stove and threw those little pieces of wood and everything that was left over in there, and a fire licked out of that potbelly stove and froze. It was that cold. He picked up that fire and threw it out on the front porch, and springtime come around, thawed it out, and burnt the cabin down. But I think of that because but I think about when they opened that furnace to throw them in, the flames licked out of there because they had it so hot. And it came out and destroyed the men that were throwing them in. He killed his own mighty men because he was so mad. But he did get them all 3 thrown in there. And it says, they got killed, and these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. So they just chucked them in there, and they fell into the fire. They're toast, literally, charred. No hope for this, because even the flames coming out killed these mighty men. Now, what happens in a fire to the oxygen? It gets used up very, very fast. And a lot of times, that's what happens in a fire, is they lose the oxygen. If your brain goes without oxygen so many seconds, you pass out. And then you're laying there and you get burned up. Smoke, all this stuff is basically, it's all the oxygen's being consumed and you can't breathe. So the flames, though, is what killed these men. It was so hot. But yet the 3 Hebrew boys fell down. Now, they were bound up. They weren't going to stay bound too long because of them flames. Going to burn everything up. But let's see what happens. Verse 24. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, was astonished. And that word astonished can also mean fear. It can also mean fear, just because it's the same word used when Belshazzar saw the finger writing on the wall. So he was astonished, and he jumped up and said unto his counselors there, did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? Basically a rhetorical question. He knew they cast 3 men in there, but he's proving a point here. They answered and said, yeah, king. He said, well, I see 4 men, and they're loose, and they're walking around in the midst of the fire, and they don't have any hurt. As a matter of fact, the form of the 4th is likened to the Son of Man. All right. He throws them in there. The guys doing the throwing die. They fall down, they get up, and they're walking around in there in the fire, and there's 4 of them. And that word where it says, looks like the Son of Man, actually is translated as a heavenly messenger. But I like to think of it as Son of Man. Who used that title? Jesus. Could this have been Jesus in pre-incarnate form? I don't know. Doesn't say. But it was God. Either God through Jesus or an emissary, an angel or whatever. It was something from God that was in there with them, protecting them. And they're up walking around. Now, number one, what are they breathing? There ain't no oxygen to breathe. That's gone. It's being consumed. Not to mention the flames and the heat. But now, the ropes that bound them, they got burned off. But as Mike said, it didn't touch that asbestos clothing. So they're up free walking around. Now, can you imagine what that's going to be like? You're in a fire, walking around with an emissary from God, probably talking. Said, look at them, they're all looking at us in here. Let's just walk around. Man, look at them, they're freaking out. And they're just walking around in there. Now I'm going to tell you something else that I got when I was doing some studying. Where did Abraham come from?
Or the Chaldees.
Ur of the Chaldees. Do you know what Ur means? Flame. Abraham came out of the flame of the Chaldees. The Hebrew children came from Abraham, are coming out of the flame of Babylon. God's hand is always on a remnant. He's always got a remnant that he's going to protect. So here they are walking around in this flame unhurt. And King Nebuchadnezzar is freaking out. He's asking stupid rhetorical questions. Hey, did we throw 3 in there? Well, yeah, you know we threw 3 in there. You sitting right here looking at it. Now, they didn't say that, but they could be thinking it. But they're probably freaking out too because they're seeing there's 4 people in there. Well, who is this other guy? Nebuchadnezzar gets up, walks over as close as he can get to this thing, and he said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. He realizes that question that he asked them just a few minutes ago, who is a God that can take you and save you? There is one. He thought himself as God. He was the most powerful man on the face of the earth. And he looked at himself as God and had everybody else look at him as God. Now he sees there is another God that's more powerful. And he said, come out, ye servants of the Most High God. God's working with Nebuchadnezzar. Now, Nebuchadnezzar was a hard case, and he needed a lot of working with, but I can relate to that. And it says, then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, no, we're enjoying this. We're going to stay here a little bit longer. No, they came forth of the midst of the fire. They came out. So what happened to the 4th guy?
Went back home.
Went back home. He did his job. Yep. But what do you think the witness accomplished in this situation? Well, it got recorded in the Bible, so it was that important. It had an impact on everybody that saw this. Now, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood their ground. They did something that most people wouldn't do. They'd say, everybody else is doing it. I'll just pretend like I'm going to worship it. I won't really be worshiping. I'll just go through the motion. No, they didn't do that. They made a stand and they committed to that stand no matter what the cost. What a witness. What a witness. That's a lesson for us today. Determine in your heart, when it comes push to shove, and you have to make that choice, have it determined in your heart the choice you're going to make. I don't know if that'll ever happen in our lifetime. It could, but like Chris said, every day we have to make choices about serving God, speaking up for God, doing things that God would want us to do. Pray and ask God to give you wisdom and direction in your life, what it is that He wants you to do. And He will. God said, ask for wisdom and I'll give it to you. That's part of my prayer every day. Give me your wisdom, Father. Chris.
Has anybody ever seen a picture of what that furnace would look like? I can't just figure out, whether it was like a pit that they threw them in or what. I don't know if I'm just asking if anybody ever saw anything.
Wes?
In several countries, they have this gigantic big dome, and it's like a 3 or 4 foot opening all the way around it. It's on metal, or not metal, ceramic, some kind of concrete post that holds this dome up. And the person on top, it puts the firewood in from the top. And they can control the heat of it by how much is open around that part.
Like a damper.
Yeah. And all the brick factories over there use this. And it's extremely, extremely hot. Ruth and I got to go up on top of one of these domes. And Ruth said if you ever want to take a picture of hell, you look down in there. I mean, it is white hot.
Yeah.
Burns. And what it's used not only for baking brick, but they have a certain time that all the people that's been convicted go to death penalty. That's where they take them and throw them in there.
Even today?
They don't even have a chance to yell. As soon as they go in that hole, the intense heat and lack of oxygen, you're dead.
Yeah.
It's it sounds cruel, but it's not cruel.
No,
no
it's
suffering.
Yeah, it's pretty fast. Yeah, I'd say.
I told Ruth, I said, imagine Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego being thrown in this thing. It had to be an extreme miracle of the good Lord.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, it's
How'd they get out?
Who?
Shadrach, Meshach, and
Where the opening is around the edge. There's 3 foot openings on a lot of them. You can walk out.
Okay.
But kind of a hole dug in the ground where the main coals are.
Well, we don't know what this would look like.
We don't know.
We-
If it's over there,
Oh,
it'd be
I
similar.
forgot.
But it's an ancient way of
Yeah.
baking brick.
Well, they use refractory brick for all the intense heat. A lot of times it's refractory. And, but
See, they've been baking brick over there since even back before the pyramid.
yeah, long time. All right, well, let's go ahead and have a prayer. Father, again, we thank you for another day. We thank you for the lesson. We pray, Lord, that it'll inspire us to resolve in our mind that we're going to take our stand and make it for you no matter what the cost. And Father, now we ask that you go with us into the next hour. Speak to us the words we need to hear from our pastor, and we thank you for it. In Jesus' name, and amen.